Hello, and welcome back to Legend of the GLORIO Heroes, your premier recap and reaction podcasts about the legendary 1988 science fiction OVA. Today, you could call today our longest day, and who might say what we might accomplish on such an auspicious date? As always, I'm your host, G. I have two glasses poured here on my desk, and I'm just waiting for my co-host Iro to arrive.
I'm here. Let's drink.
Willie, I'm sorry, Iro. I'm already bleeding out. I think
no.
it might be too late in this in a ironic
No, I'm
turn
drinking.
of tragic events. Very good Foley. I'm sure our listeners love
I'm drinking.
that.
Let's just drink together.
As you might imagine, we are talking about an auspicious trio of episodes today.
Indeed. Episodes.
Some interesting things here.
Episode 96, A Live by the Sword. Episode 97, Die by the Sword. And episode 98, Endless Requiem.
Yes. I think one of the big themes of this trio of episodes is Gee and Iro completely get it wrong. Just completely missed the mark by a mile.
About the shit I was saying in last episode.
Yes,
totally
but I think that is what has always made this podcast interesting. It's just how far off the mark we are sometimes. Like sometimes we nail
also,
it.
That's
sometimes we nail it.
Proof that we're watching episode and have no foreknowledge.
We have no future knowledge. Like, we're not being coy here where we're like, I wonder what'll happen in this battle. No, we have no clue. We have never...
I fucking said I was so sure of myself and I was totally wrong.
It's just, I think that's what makes this show still interesting. Even 90, we're almost at the triple digit mark, folks.
Almost there.
We will be talking about episode 100 in the next podcast. Like,
oof.
We are getting there, and we still get it wrong sometimes, or it's more, this show still surprises us sometimes. But we should just get right into it, because there's a lot to talk about here. So
let the record show also, I put a note here, I put down the fake money that there would be a cold opening over the OP somewhere in these 3 episodes, and I was wrong.
Yeah, apparently the battle between Reuenthal and Mittermeyer is not important enough to get a cold opening. You heard it here first. Yang dying, that's a cold OP moment. Reuenthal, though, apparently that dude doesn't matter for shit, apparently.
Yeah.
Doesn't rate.
Yeah, episode 96.
But, yes, so it opens up with the battle begins between Reuenthal and Mittermeyer, the twin stars of the Empire.
Just jump straight in, pretty much.
Yeah, they're just right into it. They kind of point out some like interesting things about this battle. Reuenthal's like setting up a lot of like contingency plans in advance to kind of encircle and trap Mittermeyer, exploit Mittermeyer's weakness. He is trying to, yes, because they point out
like speed.
Yes.
Means he gets there too fast.
Yes, Mittermeyer, the Gale Wolf, beats Reuenthal to the punch, but they point out that, however, like Reuenthal is like the superior planner and blah blah blah, but they also point out, and we will see this play out time and time again in this battle, Reuenthal does not really have a loyal camp of subordinates. He does not have... Reuenthal does not have his own Mittermeyers and Reuenthals.
Right. The best he's got is Bergengrun, basically.
Yes.
But they say that he basically assigned Bergengrun to keep all of Neue Land stable while he was off battling, as opposed to being like a competent second in command of the fleet.
Right. And it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, you can't call that a bad choice on Reuenthal's part. It's more like that was one of the only choices he had, right? Because he just doesn't have the manpower. We'll get into this later with Reuenthal, that in many ways it is similar to Yang's situation of there are just only so many people here, and we just have to make do with the best we have. But yeah, the battle opens up, takes place at Rantemario. In fact, this battle becomes known as the second battle of Rantemario.
I really like that, actually.
Yeah, I do appreciate it. Like, it gives this setting a sense of history, as it always has. Like, there's a part of you that thinks, because this is an Empire Civil War, or like because the first battle of Rantemario was between BYAC and the Empire, that maybe the Empire wouldn't even like recognize the existence of that battle. But there's this idea that like important fights are happening in this place, and like they are being recognized.
Like, it would have been really easy to have it be and any other star zone and have it be the Battle of whatever, but
right.
But like this was the good choke point in space that back then, and it still is. So
yes.
So like another battle here. It makes
like
sense.
The strategic value of that place has not changed. What has changed is just who owns which side of that battle now.
Right. It's just one of those little things, I think, that
totally
really adds to the show.
Turns out, surprise, surprise, this show is well written. But yeah, so the fight opens up. We find out that like Reuenthal outnumbers Mittermeyer roughly 5 million to 2.5 million, so roughly 2 to 1. Because this idea is that like yes, like Mittermeyer is fast, but he has outpaced the rest of his his fleet, or not his fleet, but the other fleets. Good line here where they talk about how both Reuenthal and Mittermeyer, despite the inherent tragedy of the battle, are kind of enjoying this. Like there is still a delight to be, a satisfaction to be had in the tactical challenge of this fight. And then the narrator just comes in with one of his big editorial statements of just like, and the enjoyment that is being had by these individuals could be a statement to the kind of irredeemable people that military tacticians are.
Just like some of the hardest the narration has gone in on editorializing so far,
like,
I think.
Usually the narrator is relatively like even keeled about, the narrator's feelings on these events, but just a good bit here where the narrator is basically saying, man, you gotta be a real fucking piece of shit to enjoy
fighting and sending people to their deaths.
Like to enjoy good warfare. Like, this is good battle. It's like, my guy.
What's wrong with you, dude? People are dying.
There are nearly 8 million people's lives at stake in this fight. Like, what? But, it is interesting, though. It's a good thing to point out because, think about time and time again. Like, think about how much we were, like, fist-pumping when Yang totally dunked on Geiersberg and Kev and, like, basically killed the entirety of the Geiersberg garrison in, like, one fell swoop. And it's like, in retrospect, that was pretty fucked up. But...
well, yes.
But it's also like, yeah, like... at the same time, the shit is kind of exciting, isn't it? Like, as the audience, are we really that much better? We enjoyed this episode. We did, so
it's true.
Food for thought, I guess.
They also note that Mittermeyer feels apprehension not only of fighting his best friend, but also because the soldiers under Reuenthal's command are still technically subjects of the Kaiser. And
it's almost like civil wars are bad things.
Brother should not be fighting brother.
Yes.
And they note that Mittermeyer specifically avoided like dragging things out into war of attrition.
Right.
Specifically to prevent a loss of life.
Yes. I mean, also, like, Mittermeyer with the numerically inferior forces cannot really afford to go in hard like that. However, there is somebody who can afford to go in hard like that, and it's none other than the Black Lancers, led by Bittenfeld.
Yes, now, like, having fully consolidated the remnants of the Fahrenheit fleet into the Black Lancers, Bittenfeld shows up, chewing on his protein bar.
Yes, and dropping Bittenfeld-ass lines like, let's give Mittermeyer time to eat breakfast, chomp. It's like, Bittenfeld, please! You're ridiculous. But Bittenfeld is both equally ridiculous, and he is the best at what he does, and what he does is not particularly smart, but pretty effective.
Reuenthal notes, like, man, when I was playing alongside him, I didn't think much of him, but now that I'm against him, I understand how...
right, because the thing with
presence of the Black Lancers.
Right, because the thing with Bittenfeld is, like, Bittenfeld is the dude who just, in a boxing match, he just comes at you straight on each time, and you hit him, but he just keeps going, and you don't understand it. You're like, are you too stupid to, like, block, or, like, recoil from my fist? And Bittenfeld is a dude who, like, happily and proudly answers, yes, I am too dumb to turn away from your punches.
I'm gonna fuck you up.
Like, oh my god, just Bittenfeld fucking schooled in the...
Right.
Just the most ancient art of fighting, the fist to face art of
My
fighting.
face to your fist style.
Yes, and it turns out that the like terrifying conclusion you come to is, oh no, Bittenfeld's face is tougher than my fist. But they do paint the battles not so one-sided. They point out that Fahrenheit and Bittenfeld's forces are not completely consolidated.
Right.
And that the Fahrenheit elements are kind of still resentful towards Bittenfeld, and they're not fighting at full, like, cohesion, because the Fahrenheit guys are like, it's kind of Bittenfeld's fault that Fahrenheit died, and so they're still not...
Yes.
Like they're still loyal, but they're not 100% in on the whole Black Lancer's life.
Also, like, they're all painted black, and this is a fight between Imperial ships and Imperial ships. So it's like, they note that's a little hard to make out 100% who's enemy, who's not, except for the Black Lancers, which are all painted black.
Yes, so it is easy to just shoot in that general direction. But things do start to turn around once the following day occurs and Wahlen's fleet arrives. And not only does this equal the numbers in this fight, but it also, like, turns this essentially into a tactical 3-on-1. You know, like, sure, Mittermeyer and Reuenthal pretty evenly matched, or in some ways, Reuenthal might be superior to Mittermeyer as an admiral. But you bring in Bittenfeld, you bring in Wahlen, and you realize that Reuenthal is kind of on his own. He does not have his own, like, competent men that he can rely on in a pinch.
Meanwhile, Grillpalzer and Nafstein are kind of getting the brunt of the attack, and Nafstein's like, when are we turning on Reuenthal? And explodes.
Right, Nafstein dies because, like, you know, essentially indecision. Like, the thing that, like, really hurts Reuenthal's fleet as a whole is that because both Grillpalzer and Nafstein are essentially about to turn code at any time, like, they're not fighting at full force.
They keep noting that Grillpalzer, like, hesitates just long enough that Mittermeyer's godlike speed can get in and force him to fight back or die instantly. So he never has an opportunity to turn.
Right, like, Grillpalzer keeps trying to figure out, like, when is the time to betray in this fight, but he never finds the opportunity. And this hurts him because it hurts him because Mittermeyer is here to kick his shit in, but also, like, he is not helping Reuenthal win this fight either because he is holding back in that regard too. And I also do want to point out real quick that, like, it's not necessarily so one-sided. Like, Reuenthal pulls off a kind of a good play here where he drags Berlane into a trap, and like, I mainly want to bring up this scene because it shows, like, how much, like, how good the storytelling is in Legend of the Galactic Heroes, like, how accustomed to it that, you know, you and I are in the ways, in the ways that Legend of Galactic Heroes tells its story, that we see Berlane, like, get dragged closer and closer into Reuenthal's, like, battle line, and we already kind of, like, we know, like, oh shit, like, Berlane's about to, like, really fucking get it. And then all they have to do is show you an image on the UI comm.
Here's these 7 triangles.
Right, like 7 triangles surrounding one, like, differently colored triangle that's Berlane's fleet. And, like, even if they're not showing the action, you in your heart of heart knows, oh, that one triangle in the middle is about to get fucked. But yes, Mittermeyer does manage to rescue Berlane, but Berlane gets nearly decimated as a result of it.
There's a fun scene here where the Black Lancers are getting pounded, and, you know, some of them are starting to pull back, and Bittenfeld starts shouting orders, like, just shouting out of anger, like, don't retreat. I don't give a shit about anybody who retreats. Just push forward and fucking shoot them. And they note that he wasn't, like, giving an order or anything, but his adjutant Eugen hit the broadcast button, like,
like, turn the comms on,
and
set the call to everyone.
Yes, and hearing this outburst from Bittenfeld made the Black Lancers galvanize and charge in.
Yes. Like, even the elements of the Fahrenheit fleet were like, man, fuck that Bittenfeld guy. We are not cowards.
We're going.
And so the Black Lancers somehow just blast through Reuenthal's line, not with tactics, but just sheer guts, which is a very, very Bittenfeld move.
Bittenfeld's got pretty solid adjutants who can
yes. I
know
mean,
how to wrangle him.
Like, yes, Bittenfeld is one of those dudes where, like, he is, I'm not... Again, Dusty is not wrong when he says that Bittenfeld is the guy who just continues to fail upwards. And I think some of that is because Bittenfeld is lucky enough to have good adjutants. Like, people who know how to, like, wrangle him, people who know how to, like, the best adjutants, I think, are not just, like, the guys who, like, enhance a commander, but, like, in this show, the best adjutants are also the ones who know how to counter and, like, mitigate their commanders' like worst habits.
Yes.
And so Bittenfeld's adjutants are like the equivalent of like, they are the guys who like let Bittenfeld do what he is best at while minimizing his worst habits. They are the ones who were like, no, Bittenfeld, don't eat that silica packet with the rest of the chips.
Can't stop you from pulling the trigger, but I can move your gun in the right direction.
Yes. And so, that's what we kind of see here. And so kind of by the next day, the battle's still at a stalemate. We have a great bit here where Reuenthal finally realizes, like, Yang Wen-li was a real motherfucker, huh?
Yes.
Like, he
was doing this all the time.
Right. Like, Yang Wen-li didn't just do this for one battle. This was Yang Wen-li's entire military career. In a nutshell, is fighting against an enemy that can replenish endlessly, has way more talented manpower than you do,
yes,
like can eat the losses in a way that you just cannot. Like, wow, Yang Wen-li, what a guy.
Miracle Yang the magician, that source of disease.
Yes, like y'all thought Yang Wen-li was just like some fucking like cheating trickster. No, this motherfucker was fighting with his back up against the ropes each and every time. And like, y'all didn't realize just how, like, y'all didn't realize what this man could have done to you if he had like similar levels of manpower or fleet strength. Like,
didn't have to rely on the solar flare every time. He could just use the Kamehameha.
Exactly. And so, because of like Bittenfeld's like suicidal charge, we find out that Bittenfeld eventually kind of retreats. Kind of needs to lick it. Even Bittenfeld has to lick his wounds sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And so Reuenthal goes in for an envelopment one more time. Wahlen, seeing this happen, kind of tries to go in to like intercept it. And we get this great bit where Wahlen's
energy streams start igniting from the fire, and Wahlen's flagship. Go ahead.
Yeah, it gets shot up, and we see a beam go right at Wahlen and shoot his arm off, but luckily it's the robot arm.
Wahlen just fucking stands there, is like, haha, I already lost that arm, so it's no big deal now.
Right, just, I swear to God,
he keeps giving orders with one arm.
He just like unscrews the stump of the robot arm off. He's like, whatever. Like, I swear to God, do Empire Admirals just have, like, do they just, like, write one-liners in their bathroom?
I think
like,
so.
In their spare time? Because, like, that is the only way these dudes just have this shit ready to go at all times.
If it had been if it had been the non-robot arm, dude'd be dead.
Yes, yes. But, that's the story of Legend of the Galactic Heroes, there's just freak accidents, both lucky and unlucky.
Mm-hmm.
But, because of Wahlen's interception, Mittermeyer, I guess we kind of did bring this up already, but yeah, so Mittermeyer pushes into Grillpalzer's line. Grillpalzer takes too long to decide, and really kind of begins to break apart Reuenthal's line in a way that he cannot recover from. And then we finally also see the results of Julian's decision come into play.
Right.
And we are told that Mecklinger's fleet is emerging from the Iserlohn corridor.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where Reuenthal
they think that Reuenthal's like, he probably just got told to do that. Like, the new commander of Iserlohn probably just got told to do that by Mercats. And the narrator has to go like, no, Julian came up with this on his own.
Right, like, I mean, again, it continues to show that, like, and here's the thing I'm beginning to suspect. The Empire keeps underestimating Julian.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that, oh, Julian's going to suddenly, like, bust out and become a Yang Wen Li tier fleet commander, but there is this constant vibe of everybody's like, oh, yeah, that whelp from Iserlohn got lucky. Or, like, oh, he just made the right choice. But, like, Julian is making all the right choices, and he doesn't need anyone to tell him to. Like, right. I'm not saying Julian's, like, here's the thing. With only, like, 0.0001% of the galactic population, I'm not saying that, like, Iserlohn is suddenly going to come out swinging and, like, topple the Empire, but I think that there are some big wins on the horizon for Julian because, like, people keep underestimating him. And, like, I suspect that people are going to start, like, because here's the thing, right? You go back to, like, the history of the FPA, right? Like, remember, we go all the way back to, like, the first time the FPA and the Empire met each other, right?
The Empire underestimated them and got really smacked on the nose. Just...
Right, they got wrecked by the FPA fleets during their first, like, conflicts because the FPA was, like, that was the FPA at its best, at their strongest, right?
They were preparing for this for 100 years.
Right, like, we've been training for this fight for a century, whereas the Empire was like, who the fuck are you? Holy shit, right? Like, and so, like, I'm wondering if, like, this is going to be like some weird history repeats itself shit where, like, people are like, whatever, Iserlohn's nothing, Julian, like, that Julian guy's unproven, and then Julian's going to, like, fucking come out with a sucker punch, and, like, maybe not necessarily be, like, the best tactic or, like, as good as Yang Wen Li, but because people are underestimating him, he's going to, like, get a good punch in where nobody expects it. But we've got to save that for another episode. And, point is, with Mecklinger arriving, Reuenthal can tell this fight is lost.
Right. And he has to return to Heinessen, or else Mecklinger will just take Heinessen.
Right. So he organizes a kind of organized retreat to reduce casualties. They point out that Reuenthal, like ever the, like, competent fleet commander, kind of handles the retreat very well. It's very organized. It's not, everybody, it's not disorderly. So, like, it reduces casualties, and Reuenthal himself kind of leads the bulwark to defend the retreat. However, Mittermeyer decides, rather than stay and lick his wounds, he's going to push in and advance on Reuenthal's retreat.
Indeed.
And not give Reuenthal a chance to rest. So, the fight is still on.
I have a note here that says, it's always harder for the offensive line to push in.
Yes, thank you for reminding me of that tangent I went on. I was going to point out that, like, well, before the events of 97 made themselves extremely obvious how this battle was going to go, I was really interested in this outcome because at the time, Mittermeyer is actually making quite a gamble here, like, to push in on a retreating enemy. Because, like, obviously it's like, well, logically, why shouldn't you push in on the enemy who lost?
But you don't want a repeat of Omlitzer.
Right. Like, because I think as people who are familiar with military tactics get, like, the more you push into the enemy's territory, the more it becomes their advantage because they are more familiar with the territory, they're closer to their supply lines, they're closer to their defensive placements, whereas you are getting further and further away from your own supply lines and your own reinforcements. And so Mittermeyer is kind of making a gamble here, but also he's Mittermeyer the Gale Wolf. Like, this is realistically the only play a guy like him would make,
Yes.
And I think also Mittermeyer knows Reuenthal well enough to know that, like, you give Reuenthal even, like, a little bit of breathing room, he will find a way to push back. And, like, Mittermeyer realizes he needs to lean into his advantages, his, like, specialties to throw Reuenthal off kilter. But before we get to that, we get into episode 97.
Indeed. We open with Mecklinger going through the Iserlohn corridor, and basically the Empire staff wondering, are they just gonna fucking shoot us in the back as we pass by? Like, are they actually gonna keep their word and let us go?
Right, because there's still the tension here of, like, yes, they agreed to, but because you are passing through Iserlohn, you are essentially walking past, like, the biggest cocked gun in the galaxy.
Yes. Like Mecklinger's line here, where like the staff tells him to be cautious, and he's like, well, if we're more cautious, will that turn off the Thor hammer? Like,
Yes,
They have
man.
the advantage on us no matter what, so let's just go.
Man, Mecklinger is so good. We get a lot of this episode. 97 is the episode of is the Mecklinger episode, and it makes me so mad we did not get
It took
more of
97
Mecklinger in this
episodes
show.
to get more of
Right,
Renaissance Man, Admiral
because
Mecklinger.
Mecklinger just fucking kills at this episode. So, he opens up the comms with the Iserlohn crew. Mecklinger says he wishes to salute the holy grave of Yang Wen Li.
Yes.
So kind of very much, I kind of like this, like whether Mecklinger is like being poetic or not, it really leads to this idea that even in the Empire side, Yang Wen Li is truly becoming mythologized by the galaxy.
Yeah, I mean,
like
half of the Empire swore blood oath against him. So
right, but there's also this idea of like the holy grave of Yang Wen Li, the last bastion of democracy. Like, it's not the it's what Frederica said all those episodes back. Like, Yang Wen Li would have never wanted this, but he has now become the holy martyr of democracy. Like, and Iserlohn is its new mecca, and it's kind of fascinating to see that change in their society. And
and so they all salute each other, and the Mecklinger minute is over.
Yes.
They send him on through.
Yes, and kind of so with that ending, we return back to Reuenthal's retreat, where we find out that
Grillpalzer's pulled the trigger.
Yeah, Grillpalzer decides that with Mittermeyer's fleet on the way, now is the time to turn traitor, and begins opening fire on the Reuenthal fleet, throwing their retreat into disarray. So much for the idea that we can just nakedly trust petty, ambitious individuals.
Specifically note that like a lot of Grillpalzer's staff doesn't really want to just betray, and so they're blown up with no resistance.
Yes, they are equally confused by it, and to the point where even Mittermeyer is angry over Grillpalzer's betrayal. I feel like Grillpalzer really miscalculated here, because like betraying Mittermeyer's best friend, like even if it is to help Mittermeyer, I feel like if you knew Mittermeyer as a person, you would know this would not earn you any favors in the long run.
I mean, as the Empire culture, it's okay to betray if you're asked to first, but betraying of your own volition, that's just the move of a coward.
Yes, we get a good Itano circus here, actually.
Yeah, just out of nowhere.
Just like we see one of a slightly different looking ship. I think we've seen this ship before in the past, but I think in general, like we see an Empire missile boat ship, which kind of looks almost a little bit like a little bit more like an FPA ship of just like a fucking block with like missile ports in it. Just
cool.
Opens up. It looks cool as hell.
Missiles are cool.
Yeah. We don't get enough missiles in Legend of the Galactic Heroes. Like I love my instantaneous light lasers, but like, something cool about missiles in space.
And these missiles in particular actually hit Reuenthal's flagship.
But yeah, they knock his chair over.
No, my chair! I'm stuck under this fancy chair.
Get stuck under his fancy chair, which turns out to be, shall we say, an auspicious moment, because parts of debris start falling from Reuenthal's ship, and one of them impales him.
Yeah, I already have my notes here just written, holy shit. Did not expect Reuenthal to get fucking impaled just now.
He gets speared by like what looks like a freaking like
fucking chest.
Yeah, like just a rivet or something.
Yeah,
but Reuenthal,
I honestly thought he would just die right there.
Yeah, I was like, holy shit, are they actually just going to take him out right here? But Reuenthal is too stoic and he's too dramatic for that. So he like gets up and he like just wrenches the damn thing out and tosses it aside.
Regardless of our eyes or skin, the color of our blood is the same.
Yes, fucking Reuenthal, fucking tone it down a little bit.
He's now that the clock's ticking, dude cannot be stopped.
Yes,
his don't give a fuck powers.
Yes, they bring the doctors in. The doctor's like, you need surgery immediately. You're gonna die if you leave this alone. And Reuenthal's like, very well. I'll leave it alone. It's like, what?
I don't like surgery.
Right, to the point where Reuenthal literally has like a fucking like flashback scroll of every character who has died in this show, including Bucock Chung and Yang Wen Li.
Hell yeah.
Like, they remind you that, oh wow, actually the Empire has lost a fair number of admirals over the course of this show. Like, Kirky Eyes, of course, Kempf, Lennenkampf, Steinmetz, Fahrenheit,
Mm-hmm.
Lutz. Like, there is quite a death toll if you're looking at like the grand scheme of the Empire side.
Yeah.
And Reuenthal's like, is it my turn next? And it's like, spoilers, yes it is, Reuenthal.
Yeah.
But
and the note that even injured, he commands his fleets with precision and diligence.
Yes, but they also keep showing us scenes of like, despite the doctor trying to like staple Reuenthal's wound shut, it just keeps bleeding.
Yeah, they said like it nicked his artery or whatever.
Yeah, like right next to his lung or something. It's like basically like, dude, you are fucked if you do not get this treated. And they continue to retreat. One of Reuenthal's commanders agrees to kind of hold the line to allow Reuenthal time to retreat to Heinessen. He's convinced that, like, look, even if this battle is lost, we need you on Heinessen. Like, we need you to continue to command the war effort. Mm-hmm. So Reuenthal actually agrees to it and kind of successfully gets away and makes his way back to Heinessen.
Yeah. And Grillpalzer surrenders himself to Wahlen. And everyone's like, wow, what a coward.
What a piece of shit. Like, even in the way he surrenders is a piece of shit. Right. Because turns out Grillpalzer, rather than...
Yeah, does not submit judgment to Mittermeyer, but to Wahlen instead.
Right, as of, like, hoping to get some leniency. And it's like, they point out that even this act, like, encapsulates, like, the degree of cowardice in this man. But we find out that, like, Reuenthal's fleet is shattered. The morale is destroyed. Like, they're captured. Like, we are told that, like, almost the entirety of Reuenthal's fleet is captured or destroyed here. Like,
yes,
in essence, Reuenthal's war is over. Like, there is no coming back from this battle. The writing is on the wall here.
Mm-hmm. Like, surprising to me almost, because, like, again, before we got to these episodes, we thought for sure Reuenthal would, like, fight his way up to Reinhard, but given the events, like, it seems way closer to he never really stood a chance to begin with of making this work.
I think this is really interesting because, like, maybe we could just get into this now, but, like, narratively, we all assumed, like, oh, like, narrative causality demands that Reuenthal fight Reinhard, right? Like, that is the fight we're paying to see here. But what Legend of the Galactic Heroes is telling us is that, like, Reuenthal convinced himself he could take on the Empire and win. But, like, realistically, like, this fight had to happen to remind us how big the Empire is at this point. Like, they control 99% of space. They control 99% of the human population. Like,
yeah,
you don't just, like, walk up to an organization that large and just start throwing swings and hope to win. You know, like, this is, I mean, again, like, if we go back to our 7-Eleven AU about Legend of the Galactic Heroes, Reuenthal thought that he could just, like, walk up to, like, Reinhard's side of the parking lot and just start, like, smashing windows. But, like, you know, like,
we're
sure,
all standing here, right here, dude.
Right, like, Reuenthal might beat Mittermeyer in a fist fight. Like, hell, he might even beat Reuenthal. I mean, Reuenthal might even beat Mittermeyer and Bittenfeld in a fist fight. But he's not going to beat Mittermeyer, Bittenfeld, and Wahlen, and Mecklinger, and Reinhard. like at some point, it's like, yeah, you might knock one of them out, but the rest of them are just going to, like, knock you down and then just kick the shit out of you. Like, yeah. It's like, the sheer scale of your, like, but also, like, the interesting thing is, like, also, like, sure, you look at the numbers, you say, oh, like, that it's set in stone, but also, like, smaller rebellions have won in history. You know, you look at the American Revolution, you know, like, hell, you look at, like, the Vietnam War in some regards, like, smaller forces have won. And so it's not necessarily that, oh, Reuenthal was doomed to lose, but, like, it was always going to be an uphill battle. And this fight is kind of like a reality check that, like, Reuenthal didn't, in a lot of ways, like, especially when he thinks back to Yang Wen-li, I think Reuenthal just never had the right mindset to win this rebellion.
Yeah.
Like, you think about, like, how does Yang fight when his back is up against the wall? He doesn't...
Every fucking advantage you can get.
Yeah, like it's not as far as like he fights dirty, but he fights in a tricky way. He makes things hard for his enemies. He never gives his enemies a time to rest. Like, not to say Yang Wen-Li could have won this fight, but I mean, honestly, you give Yang Wen-Li Reuenthal's fleet and manpower, like, I think Yang Wen-Li could have won, but also because Yang Wen-Li would have fought differently,
Yang Wen-Li
right?
doesn't
Like, Yang
fight for
Wen-Li,
conquest.
right, he fights to survive. Like, Yang Wen-Li is the kind of dude where, like, if he fought Mittermeyer with, 5 million to 2 million advantage, like, I'm not to armchair, like, not to armchair admiral here, but, like, in, like, my head canon, like, Yang Wen-Li would probably fight Mittermeyer until Bittenfeld arrives, and then would retreat. Because, like, Yang Wen-Li's the kind of dude who knows that, like, the more and more of, like, the Empire admirals that start showing up, the more things are going to go against his favor.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Yang Wen-Li probably would have fought Mittermeyer until Bittenfeld and Wahlen showed up. He would have retreated. He would know that Mittermeyer would be the first to catch up again. He would probably pound on Mittermeyer again there until Bittenfeld and Wahlen caught up again. Then he would retreat for a third time, again, wait for Mittermeyer to be the first one to get there. Like,
keep wearing him down.
Right, like, and then eventually this would all culminate in some ridiculous half-assed plan where Bittenfeld crashes into an asteroid fleet because, like, Yang Wen-Li's strategies are fucking ridiculous. But, like, that's the thing. Reuenthal would never fight that way because he has too much pride to fight like that. Like, what Reuenthal wants is one big, like, flashy, definitive victory. And when you fight to the Empire's rules, you're gonna lose to the stronger side.
Yeah.
Like, and so in a way, it's like, in hindsight, it feels obvious, but I think it's a testament to the show that
that's history, baby.
We didn't really, or more that we didn't really know until we didn't really know how things were really going until it was
so it was already there.
Obvious.
Yeah, we were dancing Rubinsky's tune the whole fucking time. Oh, look,
totally.
And so Mittermeyer meets with the rest of the admirals to figure out, like, how to chase Reuenthal best, but they've also just dealt with, all the deserters and Grillpalzer's fleet and all that business going on, and so they said prepare to pursue to the Barlet Star Zone, but Reuenthal's heading back to Heinessen. And meanwhile, Bittenfeld and Wahlen are walking out of this meeting, and old Bittenfeld's like, "Ha if I were the one who rebelled and the Kaiser ordered you to go on a campaign against me, would you do it, Wahlen?" Wahlen's just like, "Yeah."
And Wahlen is in
don't ask stupid questions.
Like, Wahlen is in Wahlen is in no mood to entertain Bittenfeld's, like, weird pensive musing. He is just like, it's like Bittenfeld. It's very much like Wahlen is like, Bittenfeld, it's very cute that you're trying to be smart right now, but, like, nobody's in the mood for it, especially from you.
Wahlen is basically worried about the precedent this sets of Reuenthal was one of the most trusted, subordinates. He was given charge of Neue Land. Like, if he's rebelling, who else can the Kaiser trust?
Right, like, there's this idea that, like, Reuenthal's rebellion is not only, like, a material harm to the Empire, but it is a spiritual one. It is living proof that no one is immune to disunity and disloyalty. You have to remember, right? Like, Reinhard builds up this entire cult of personality around, like, Reinhard and his chosen, right? His hand-picked chosen. Like, these individuals that are under my command these are not guys who got here because of connections. They're not here because of privilege.
The meritocracy going on.
Right. I picked the best of the best. And, like, on one hand, that means that their successes are his successes. However, it also means that their failures are implicitly his failures.
Yeah.
And that even somebody that, like, the Kaiser himself handpicked can betray him. Like, again, it's like what you said. They're playing right into Rubinsky's hands. They are setting a precedent that there is nobody Reinhard cannot trust, or like, cannot at least be suspicious of. Right? Like with the death of Kirky Eyes and the estrangement of Anna Rose, like Hilda's the only one who's left. And again, I don't want to get into full speculation territory here, but the fact that she is like hiding the pregnancy from Reinhard, like I'm really worried about that's gonna pop off in a bad way down the line. Like, I feel like you do not explicitly have a character say something like that unless there's gonna be like an unfortunate narrative payoff later. And I'm not, I don't know. I'm not saying like Reinhard is going to be like, what? You didn't tell me about the pregnancy, so you too have betrayed me or something. But like, also Reinhard is like so like unpredictable and kind of unhinged at this point that like, like I think that's what Wahlen is worried about. Like Reuenthal has like permanently destroyed a relationship between Reinhard and his admirals. Like, there will now be like a gulf between them that will never go away because the possibility of another Reuenthal will always exist.
So Reuenthal refuses to ditch his flagship, continues to be Reuenthal to the bitter end.
Yes.
And the narrator notes that he had relentless rationality, which I'm not so sure about. And
a guy who repeatedly refuses life-saving surgery is not somebody I would call rational.
Indomitable self-control is a hard maybe. Let's go with yes, but for the wrong things.
Yeah, let's put it that way. But yes, he does manage to.
Yeah, he manages to get Highness in.
Sorry, go ahead.
Mecklinger meets up with the Mittermeyer fleet, and Mecklinger, the smart one, is like, "Hey, stuff doesn't add up about that assassination attempt. How come nobody's talking about this? We should investigate further."
There's a weird sudden realization of their dumbassery on the parts of like Mittermeyer that's like, oh, that's something we should have looked into before we declared war, huh? But it's like, I mean, it's like, Mittermeyer, it's not your fault. It really is Reuenthal and Reinhardt's fault for being too fucking ridiculous to like stop for even a minute to let a guy like Mecklinger be like, hold on a sec.
Yeah.
Like,
should listen to Renaissance Man, Admiral Mecklinger.
Yes. But yeah, so Mecklinger goes to Uravasi and kind of investigates. He reopens the case.
Yeah.
And he discovers that he finds out about Grillpalzer's purposeful obfuscation of the Earth Cult plot.
Yeah.
And so, upon figuring this out, Mecklinger has Grillpalzer called in. And
into the principal's office.
Yes. Mecklinger is there tapping on a manila folder, looking very stern. And Mecklinger just really dresses down Grillpalzer here. Like, the best line here is where Mecklinger says that, like, Grillpalzer, you have not just committed a crime, you have committed a double crime. Like, not only have you betrayed your Kaiser, you've also hidden information from, like, you have hidden information that has led to this war. Like, in essence, this war is your fault. You ensured that this rebellion was inevitable. Like, had you not hidden this information, perhaps we could have avoided this whole damn thing. And, Grillpalzer tries to fucking, like, plead and fucking growl, like, oh no, I was always loyal. I wanted to expose Reuenthal so that, like, we could nip him in the bud. And, like, Mecklinger, another great line is like, a mouse like you could never be a lion's friend. And it's
never grasp, like, you cannot grasp the true intentions of a lion.
Yeah, and I think the thing that Mecklinger is actually really nailing here is, like, what we said before, where, like, Grillpalzer, like, because again, we have to be reminded that, like, Grillpalzer's motivation time and time again has been this idea of, like, oh, I'm a junior admiral and, like, we're running out of wars to earn glory in. Like, I'm never gonna, like, I'm never going to get to that place where Reuenthal and Mittermeyer are because they got their promotions through like warfare.
It's a meritocracy, and I won't have any chance to show my merit.
Right, like, because I'm such a narrow-minded dumbass that I think that, like, military affairs is the only chance for me to show off. You know, completely ignoring that there are dudes like Kessler and Mecklinger who have thrived in this, like, New World Order doing zero war
Even
Mecklinger's
fighting. Like, as a scholar, you've betrayed, like, your chances. Grillpalzer, you discovered that star, man!
Yes. Yeah, it's like Mecklinger of all people is the person who should be dressing down Grillpalzer, because Mecklinger is a person who has not earned any glory in this show through war, right? Like, I mean, it has been detrimental to his screen time, but I would not say that has been detrimental to like Mecklinger the person. Like, Mecklinger the person we see time and time again
seems reasonable.
I mean, maybe he's not as blindly he's not as blindly ambitious as like Reuenthal, but he seems to be doing all right for himself. Like, in the same way that, like, look, like, in many ways, I kind of see a parallel between Mecklinger and Casualties.
Sure, yes,
like,
I see that.
Like, Casualties is not a dude you send in to like to throw fists. He's the guy you have in the back who makes sure that, like, okay, do we have enough bullets and food to fight this battle?
Accountability,
you know, and like, yeah, like, you need people like that in war. You need people who are like, I did the math, and we'll need so and so supplies. You know, like, that's just as valuable. And I don't know, yeah, it's like, and so like the idea, you know, I think it fits like Mecklinger of all people, a guy who is inherently not a glory hound, is like,
for being such a glory hound,
idiot,
like, dumb kid,
right? Like, you squandered your entire career. Like, you could have served with honor in the Kaiser's new peaceful world order, like, and earned your place in history, but like, you could have become a history writer, but you didn't. You fucked up, and now you'll be remembered as a traitor and a coward and a sneak and an example of like what every like Empire admiral should never aspire to be.
Yeah.
And with that, we finally return to Heinessen,
yes,
where
the narrator notes
Reuenthal has returned.
Narrator notes that the Reuenthal fleet has been reduced to 10% of its number, and half of that 90% died battle.
Yes, and the other half surrendered.
Absurdly high number.
Again, Legend of Galactic Heroes, despite being largely like pretty grounded in a lot of areas, still loves to throw out ridiculous numbers for its casualties and fights, which are unbelievable.
2 million people died on Reuenthal's side.
Yes, it's ridiculous, but I mean, I think they throw out numbers like that to make sure we understand Reuenthal's not coming back from this. Like, he's done. Like, he is fighting no more battles. And like these are casualties that even Yang Wen-li would struggle to come back from.
Yeah.
And a guy that is less than Yang Wen-li's caliber is certainly not going to.
Yeah.
And with that, we finally come into the final episode of the 3.
Narrator notes that Reuenthal's longest day has begun.
Yes. To echo back to the beginning of this podcast, we are now at the beginning of Reuenthal's longest day. So first things, so we find that Reuenthal essentially
just went back to his office.
Essentially, Reuenthal has come back to his office to take care of a few trifling matters that need to be taken care of before the rest of the Empire get here. First things first, he brings in Alzheimer, Lutz's brother-in-law, essentially. And says, all right, you're released from house arrest.
You're in charge now.
You're in charge now. Like, I'm not long for this world, and somebody's got to run this place. And Alzheimer agrees, and then Reuenthal's like, next on the docket, bring in Job Trunit.
Bring in that motherfucker.
Job Trunit, we have another appellation for him. Meeting with Job Trunit, as unpleasant as death.
Yep.
So Reuenthal essentially brings Trunit into his office, and they kind of have a one-on-one, you know, just a nice little private conversation. You know, Reuenthal is like, you know,
In accordance with autocracy, I
So,
rebelled.
Yeah. And like, what is your like petty little? What would your democracy think of that? And like, Trunit's brings out goes full shitbag in this segment here, where he's
I don't
just
give a
like,
fuck about democracy. I don't give a fuck about
yeah,
autocracy either. I'm for whatever
yeah,
gets me more power.
right, like Trunit literally says democracy can't be that special if a dirtbag like me can thrive, and that I am in fact happy and proud to be an opportunistic bottom feeder. And you know, and then Reuenthal says, kind of gives him a loaded question. He's like, so does that mean that like you're going to exploit the Kaiser too? You're going to exploit the autocracy? You're going to
Right.
poison our government too in the
Just
name
as
of
you've done
getting
with
ahead?
the Free Plants Lands and the Earth Cult.
Yes, and Schroeder's like, hell yeah, I am. Fuck the Kaiser. Fuck that blonde brat. He doesn't know shit. I'm gonna poison him, his government. I'm gonna bring it all down, and I'm gonna come out
probably
on
thought
top.
that dumbass kid sucked too if you rebelled against him.
And like, Reuenthal's just like, yeah, I thought you might say that, and pulls a fucking gun out and just shoots Job
Finally.
Like, yes, finally. Took 98 episodes. We are finally given the thing we have begged for this entire show. Reuenthal finally does what nobody else has been able to do in the show so far, which is just give no fucks and just blast Job Trunit.
Too so slimy that it took all of Reuenthal's don't give a fuck energy multiplied by his deathbed to finally get a grasp on that guy.
And you'll realize, oh, Reuenthal returned thousands of miles back to Heinessen, essentially to make sure he could shoot Job Trunit.
All right.
Which is like, if there's any individual in the galaxy that is so detestable that as you are bleeding to death, you would return home thousands of miles away.
You really need to fuck that guy over.
Like, not like, you think about a guy like Reuenthal and his personality. You thought, oh, maybe he's gonna go out in a suicidal final charge. Maybe he'll pull off a Bukok and like request one last like talk with Reinhard. No, he's like, no. There is one last thing I got to do. Like one last salt. Like, because here's the thing, right? If Reuenthal knew he was gonna lose the fight, he could have actually hurt the Empire in one final definitive way. And that is mail Job Trunit alive and well back to Fazan. Like, that would probably like deliver Job Trunit right. Like sending Job Trunit alive and in good standing back to Reinhard could probably do more damage than anything Reuenthal's actual fleet could do. But Reuenthal's like, if I was going to beat Reinhard, I want to do it with my own two hands. I'm not going to let a fucking snake like you do that. So he gives a great speech here where he's like, a little paraphrase here, but he's basically like, I don't give a damn if you belittle democracy and profit at the expense of a nation or its people, but you will not sully the Kaiser with your filthy, feces-filled tongue. And if I cannot defeat the Kaiser, then I can at least shoot you.
Finally. Just
and
Christ.
Job Trunit at a loss for words. No pithy comeback. It's like that's the delicious thing about this death is that this entire show, Job Trunit has been convinced of his untouchable status. That like you can hate him, you can openly hate him, you can openly detest him, but you can't touch him.
Dude just keeps going.
He's too valuable.
What are you gonna do?
Right, like he is too valuable. He hedges too closely to the word of law. He knows, and he knows for the most part that he is dealing with people too principled to just shoot him. Like think about like when Job Trunit is dealing with people who are like actually violent and unpredictable enough to kill him, he kowtows. He begs and he scrapes. That's what he did with Reuenthal until he made the fatal flaw of bad-mouthing the Kaiser. Is that even with Reuenthal, he was still like, oh, yes, you, Reuenthal, honored Reuenthal. Until now, where he pushes too far. He thinks this is still the same Reuenthal he was talking with like 5 episodes ago, right? The Reuenthal that was willing to just have him put under house arrest, but not murdered in cold blood. But he makes the mistake. He realizes, oh, you're not dealing with that Reuenthal anymore. You were dealing with a Reuenthal who has run out of fucks to give, who is on his deathbed and knows it, and is like, motherfucker, I'm not going to even be around to experience the consequences of this
I'll
act.
just fucking do it.
Like, right. And, like, it is so satisfying to see a man so convinced. Like, a man so convinced he could just shit-talk Reinhard to Reuenthal's face and eventually walk out of that room unharmed. Like, so convinced. And to see him fucking choke on his goddamn blood is so goddamn satisfying. And a part of me is, like, so mad it took this long.
But also delayed satisfaction
like,
is...
Yes. And it really gets to this idea of, like, I don't know, maybe just bring it up now, is, like, the bravery of Yoshika Tanaka to write a story in which... Actually, you know, we'll save this for later, because we're not done with satisfying deaths in this episode. We'll get to this later. Instead, let's move on to who the next person on the docket of Reuenthal's.
Of course, Elfried von Kohlrausch appears in the office as well. Full-on Sailor Moon villain looking Elfried. Big 80s hair and all.
Yes, looking increasingly ridiculous as we approach the year 2000.
But she's here to basically taunt Reuenthal, watch him die, tell him off for being who he is, and taunt him with the existence of his child that he didn't want to exist.
Right.
And but Reuenthal, in his full don't give a fuck power, is basically, you know, brings it full circle, thinks about how his best friend, who always wanted a child but never managed to conceive, and yet he, who hated his father and hates children, tells Elfried to entrust Mittermeyer with the child.
Yeah.
Because they're far more qualified to raise a child in this tumultuous time.
Yes, and that Reuenthal's kid deserves a much better father than Reuenthal could ever be. And that kind of one last favor to the friend he still cherishes. Reuenthal kind of commenting and musing about how silly and how weirdly sentimental he is getting, knowing he is on death's door. Like, he knows he's being ridiculous. Reuenthal himself knows he's being extra in his longest day. Like, I'm doing some weird stuff today that I would not normally do. Like, I shot Job Trunet. I just I left that blood stain there. I'm doing all these favors. I'm begging this woman I hate to give this baby to my best friend.
We know the child has blue eyes. Does not have the heterochromia.
Yes, 2 blue eyes. And we some more hours pass. We are met with Reuenthal's unnamed adjutant, who really deserves a raise after all of this.
Holding his baby. He was like,
is told to take care of this baby and write down Reuenthal's last words.
Right. He pours 2 glasses of whiskey for Reuenthal.
Yes.
And Reuenthal has a vision of Ghost Mittermeyer drinking with him. Laments that he will not live long enough to share a final drink. And adjutant dude has the quick thinking enough to grab a clipboard and write down Reuenthal's last words.
Yes. And with that, Reuenthal passes away in his chair.
Born and died in the same year as Yang Wen Li.
Yes. They point out both died at age 33. Boy, these guys are young.
Don't even remind me, dude.
Yeah. And then they say that like a few hours later, Mittermeyer lands on Heinessen, where they don't say the word, but Mittermeyer basically muses that perhaps Reuenthal merely lost because he had no Nakama, he had no friends.
Like, I had Bittenfeld and Wahlen on my side.
Right. Like it's hard to tell. Like it's hard to tell whether Mittermeyer is being humble or if he's being realistic. Where he's like, Reuenthal had me dead to rights. Like I would not have won that fight without
Either
Wahlen
way,
and
it is
Bittenfeld.
very in character for Mittermeyer.
Yeah, and I mean to some degree, I might agree just because like you know like I liked Mittermeyer, but I feel like that fight didn't really start to go his way until his buddies started
Right.
showing up. So, but anyways, Mittermeyer gets led to Reuenthal's office where he finds Reuenthal's body, and Mittermeyer is ridiculous. He decides that he sees the 2 glasses of whiskey there, and he decides that the sensible thing to do is rip the Empire flag that is like in the office off its like pole, and then drape it over Reuenthal's body. We're not done with absurdity here yet because tragically we also find out that poor Bergengrun has locked himself in a room. Bergengrun realizes that he has now lost. He has been an adjutant to both Kirkeyes and Reuenthal, saying that he is ashamed. He has served under 2 of the greatest admirals this era has ever known, and they have both died. Not under his watch, but essentially like he has in his eyes, he has failed the both of them.
And they both died to like shitty political schemes, basically. Like
right, yes. Bergengrun correctly points out. He calls out to Mittermeyer and the rest of the crew that are like outside the door. Like, hey, by the way, Kirkeyes and Reuenthal were literally some of the best pieces on the board you ever had, and you threw them away because of politicking, because of bullshit schemes that you were too slothful to deal with, that you vastly underestimated. Like whether he is explicitly calling out Oberstein himself, or the Earth Cult, or perhaps just Oberstein's willful ignorance of these machinations. Point is, like, the Empire is in a worse place, not because of its enemies, but because of its own, like, political and bureaucratic ineptitude. And with that, he also takes his own life.
Shoots himself.
Yeah, and with that taken care of, and the rebellion officially quelled, Wahlen stays behind on Heinessen, while Mittermeyer returns to Fazan. We get a real hard scene here where we see, Mittermeyer kind of breaking down. He's crying a bit. Yeah, off in the corner while all his adjutants are looking at him from like the other side of the room, which is a little ridiculous. But,
poor Mittermeyer.
I think Bearlane says something like, commit this to memory. You'll never see this ever again. But
and
just poor Mittermeyer, really poor. Like, of anybody who really should be like, we should really be feeling sorry for in these episodes, it is.
Yeah, dude didn't deserve that.
Mittermeyer. Like, all right, if we're gonna like, maybe we'll save this for our like end of season 4 wrap up podcast. It will be another topic of who had the hardest life in Legend of the Galactic Heroes. Like, I'm pretty sure Yang Wen Li wins that, but like, I feel like Mittermeyer is definitely a contender just because, like, in terms of disparity between goodness of his spirit and the life events he is forced to contend with. But yeah, and then we finally cut back to Reinhard, who we have not seen this entire trio.
Being informed of the situation.
Yes, and he is in his bed. He is once again sick with something.
Yep.
We don't know what.
He notes that basically
the narrator continues to drop.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say the narrator continues to drop very ominous tones of like, had the others known how serious the sickness was, perhaps, and then ellipses. It's like,
yeah.
I swear to God, that's got to drop eventually, right? We are 98 episodes in. They eventually got to reveal to us, like, oh, like, I don't know, man, Reinhard's got
something
like HIV or cancer or something. Like, I mean, I don't mean like literally those diseases, but you know what I'm saying.
Anime terminal disease.
Right? He's got the Clanad illness or whatever. Just. But, anyways, go ahead.
He's like, maybe the only way to satisfy Reuenthal would have been for me to fight him personally. And narrator also notes that not even Reinhard realized that the only way he would have been satisfied would have been to fight Reuenthal personally.
It's almost like Reinhardt's greatest flaw is his inability to recognize that that undoubtedly, Reinhard will leave the Empire in a better place than when he found it. Like, of course, he has objectively made the Empire a better place. But also, he has not made it as good of a place as it could have been.
Yeah.
Because of his, like, distinct, undeniable personal failings. His emotions, his impetuousness, his warmongering.
Yeah.
And how much like that has rubbed off on his subordinates, or has allowed his subordinates to, you know, in Reuenthal's case, like convince themselves of certain things, or in like Oberstein's case, allowed them to get away with things that they never should have been allowed to.
Yeah. And he gets a voicemail from Hilda, basically Hilda continuing to be highly industrious and diligent in her duties, basically saying like Lutz's fiance refused to receive survivor benefits, and don't get mad at her. She's professional. How about you create like the Lutz Foundation for military nurses or something?
Man, there's gonna be a lot of
Admiral Foundation for
Admiral named foundations and medals being handed down by the end of Reinhardt's reign.
Yeah.
Like we already got the Kirky Eyes Memorial Medal of Valor, and the Tri Admiral Fortress, and the Lutz Medical Foundation for nurses or whatever. Like, man, how many more of these are we gonna get? Man, what would Bittenfeld's foundation fundraiser be called?
Be an MMA gym.
Would it be like the Bittenfeld like youth athletic center?
Yes, exactly that.
Yes, what is that? What are those acronyms? There's Bittenfeld Youth Athletic, the BYAC, the BYAC.
God damn it! Yep.
Everybody's coming down to the BYAC. We're not done with this episode yet, though.
Anyway, Hilda's now 4 months pregnant.
Yes,
which means she's now legally required to change into mom clothes.
Right, by fiction,
wearing this,
required to be wearing
this long, nice dress and this shawl.
Yes, the fiction's shorthand for "this is an expecting mother" is a full body gown and a onesie. Not a onesie, a shawl.
Onesie. Now she just needs to tie her hair.
A onesie, not a onesie.
Now she just needs to tie her hair into a side tail and.
Yes, go full anime mom. But yes, we do return to Hilda. She is speaking with Papa Mariendorf, who says that he is going to retire soon, because it turns out that even if Mariendorf was maybe not the most competent individual in the Empire, he was actually a weirdly intelligent one. He points out that, look, Hilda, even if
him,
you will still be the mother of the Kaiser's successor. That's going to set some weird precedents, and like history has shown us that nothing good in history has ever come of like someone in my position holding the amount of power I do. Like, it's going to lead to weird relationships. People are going to use my position to like advocate and defend bad shit down the line.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to retire now while like things are still good. And it's like, hey, that turns out Yang Wen-li, not the only individual in this world obsessed with the concept of historical precedents.
Yep, and he says Admiral Mittermeyer should take my position because even though he's a military man, not a politician, if someone like me could do that, obviously he can do it better than me.
Sure, though of course the immediate joke I make is like, Mittermeyer is way too honorable to be a good politician, so like we'll see how that goes. I don't know. Maybe we'll get to look forward to. Maybe the remaining episodes will be about Mittermeyer's burgeoning political career.
Maybe. Look, he has had a very successful military career.
Yeah, I mean, didn't we always say like,
man?
Yeah, like isn't the thing we always like all the characters always pointed out? I was like, man, wouldn't it be great if like Bittenfeld and Job Trunit were like existed in the same government? Just imagine like the fucking like ridiculous shit that would happen there. And like, hey, we're about to get Mittermeyer in the government, so who knows? Maybe he'll finally be able to call out Oberstein on some of his shit.
Speaking of, enough evidence has surfaced about Lang that Kessler brings him in.
Yes,
and
locks him up. Interrogated.
Is like, we could just like if you don't talk, we'll torture you. Like you tortured all these other people.
Right. And there's like this panning shot. Yeah, you go ahead.
Yeah, we pan over to the torture wall.
Yes, it's
fucking hammers and axes and pliers and ball and chains and zap machines and fucking whatever.
The Empire is so ridiculous. Like, here's the thing. I am not saying the FPA would not torture people or would not be above torturing people. Sure. Like, y'all wouldn't torture people, but I know for a fact there are people in the FPA who would happily resort to torture. And I think the thing that, like, in my head speaks to, like, what is the thematic difference between the FPA and the Empire is that, like, if the FPA tortured somebody for information, the scene would be, like, of a waterboarding.
Yes.
But a scene of the Empire torturing somebody is like a big buff gimp bringing out an electro whip and then bragging about how much he likes to torture people. And then behind him is a rack of hammers and axes. And I'm not trying to imply one of those is the better way to torture people, but I think it speaks to, like, the ridiculous, like, narrative beats that those two factions, like, exist on and the disparity between them.
Yes, remember, kids, torture is bad. Waterboarding is torture. Don't fucking do it.
Yes, but also electro whipping is torture, so don't do that either. And don't brag about how good you are at torture. It doesn't set a good precedent.
Anyway, Lang demands to know what happened to Reuenthal, and upon hearing that Reuenthal has died, the narration says he laughed for over an hour straight and then confessed everything. And
because I mean, like,
by confessing everything, they mean self-justifying his own behavior and shifting all of the guilt onto Rubinsky and Oberstein.
Of course. Still a politician to the end. But it's a little frustrating. I mean, it's really satisfying to see Lang finally get his, but it's also frustrating because you realize, like, he's getting his after his plan already succeeded.
Yeah.
Like Lang, like, I mean, not that... You can't say somebody wins or loses in such an objective sense, but, like, if Lang's sole goal was to fuck over Reuenthal, then Lang hugely succeeded. Lang, I mean, by the standards of what their individual personal goals were, Lang succeeded more than Reuenthal.
Yeah.
You know, if, like, Lang won in a sense. He got his petty revenge on Reuenthal, even if it means the cost of his life and career.
Yeah.
And it kind of sucks that this is how it went down, but I think this is also, like, important stuff to see because it reminds us, like, you know, like, this is exactly what Bergengrun was talking about. Like, good men are getting killed by bad men on the same side essentially.
Yeah. And so Empire troops raid all of Rubinsky's crazy hideouts. Get a nice montage.
Yes, we see them going to, like,
the mountain cabin and the office and the underwater villa thing. And
yes,
but he's gone from all of them. Nobody can find Rubinsky.
It turns out that not all of them were holograms. Enough of them were actual real locations that dude was just chilling out on Fazan. Again, it's it was sci-fi written in a different time period. They probably did not have the idea of like how accurate satellite like GPS like cameras could become in the future, but the idea that like there are places on Fizan that are like remote and uncharted enough in a world where they have like faster than light speed travel, but could not find a man in one of his like 100 supervillain layers is so ridiculous.
He's just that good, man.
Yeah, I mean, also in all fairness, the Empire wasn't trying that hard until now, right? Like, did anybody even say Rubinsky's name in the Empire?
I think someone did once, like, but he was not a major thing.
Right. So I guess it's as much their negligence as as anything.
Yep. And so Lang's wife appears to, does the whole he's a good family man, he's a good husband, a nice father.
She's pulling the same fucking excuse that any like famous rich white dude who gets accused of doing bad shit carts out as like a defense of like I'm a loving husband and a committed father. It's like you can be both of those things and still be an awful human being, right?
And I mean that's what Kessler basically says. He's like, don't misunderstand. Like the reason he's being prosecuted has nothing to do with him being a good husband and a kind father. Like his private affairs are not relevant to this case.
Right, like we are dealing with the fact that like your husband might be a good man to you, he's also an unrepentant piece of shit. Like those things are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we kind of finally end it with we return to Oberstein's office.
Oberstein
where he and so just kind of
hang out.
It's a funny looking office because like it's just the two of them in there, just like
they're like laptops and paperwork.
Yeah, and
it's
like
huge room.
It's a huge room. It's just the two of them. It's really goofy looking, honestly. And Oberstein just out of nowhere, all of a sudden, brings up out loud like, "Here's why I think Mittermeyer had to kill Reuenthal."
Like imagine him,
and that is because
after like they came to work, let's say like 8:30, and they've been working, and it got to lunch break, and lunch break was fine, and then now it's like 3:45, and it's been in silence all day, and then Oberstein's like, "Hey, do you know why Mittermeyer killed Reuenthal?"
That's a perfect way to put it, right? Like because of the weird framing of the scene, like there's nobody else in there. Like it very much feels like, oh, have they just been sitting and working in silence this whole time? And then all of a sudden, Oberstein just opens up about this, and Oberstein essentially says that he thinks that if Mittermeyer had let Reinhard land the killing blow on Reuenthal, no matter how loyal Mittermeyer is, no matter how much he truly believes in Reinhard's vision for the Empire, if he had let Reinhard kill his best friend, Mittermeyer would never forgive him.
Right.
Like, never. No matter how logical, rational he tries to be about this, even if Reuenthal truly did betray the Empire, Mittermeyer truly loved Reuenthal that much. Like, he was...
Mittermeyer's too loyal of a man.
Yeah, like... And so Mittermeyer felt like if he had to quash those feelings, if he wanted to stay loyal to the Empire and to the Kaiser, he had to land the killing blow himself. And that would allow him to direct any resentment about killing his best friend to himself, rather than to any, like, blame it on any external fact.
And then nothing would compromise his loyalty.
Now, that said, that's Oberstein's musing, and it's funny that Oberstein would bring that up, because we know for a fact that Bergengrun himself, in his dying moments, within earshot of Mittermeyer,
right,
specifically calls out other elements as the cause of Reuenthal's death. And combine this with like this subplot they're building up to of like Mittermeyer becoming like the new, what is it, like, I don't even remember the name of Elder Mariendorf's position, but
it's like chief of something. I'd have to.
The point is, like, if they're building up to this subplot of Mittermeyer joining politics, like, you almost start to wonder, right? Like, after hearing what Bergengrun said, do you think Mittermeyer starts to, like, actually turn Oberstein into the source of his resentment for Reuenthal's death?
I think that's a big possibility.
Like, because, like, because left between Mittermeyer blaming himself and Mittermeyer blaming Reinhard, Oberstein all of a sudden becomes a new convenient third option.
Yeah.
And
I think that depends
I wonder
on
if
he hears from Kessler and or Mecklinger, or whoever, that Oberstein is culpable somehow.
Yeah, because I mean, like, now that they know Lang is responsible, and of course, of course, Lang is just like trying to cover his ass by blaming whoever he can, but also Lang wasn't necessarily incorrect about his blame shifting. Like, Oberstein knew about the plot,
Yeah,
and he still let it happen. So again, he did not necessarily pull the trigger, but he certainly, like, he saw the bullets, he saw the gun, and he didn't do anything about it.
yeah.
And how culpable is he then in this entire thing? And we're kind of just left with those uncomfortable questions.
And the
As
rebellion has been put down, but
yeah, as this episode comes to an
no
end,
one could say if it would return to a peaceful era.
Spoilers, probably not. We still got 12 episodes of this show left.
12, yeah, not too many podcasts left.
Not too many. We're coming close to an end here, folks. It's been, I don't want to start tossing out speeches now about how it's been a ride, but it's
been a ride.
It's crazy, man. I mean, again, we'll be talking about episode 100 in the next podcast, and for the listeners who are doing the math, we will probably have our very last Legend of the GLORIO Heroes wrap-up podcast by the end of this year.
Either right before the end of the year or right after. So
yeah, we're still figuring out the math there, but it's and yet we look at the plot line here, and again, we're still getting surprised.
Mm-hmm.
We're still
Speaking of,
we're so curious.
Okay, I know this is kind of hard left, but
okay,
I did watch Dinoy Teze yesterday.
Oh yeah, we did.
We found out who's the dual wielder.
Yeah, turns out it was Mittermeyer. Duh.
Of course, it was Mittermeyer.
Yeah. So for those who need context, we are talking about DNT's portrayal of the scenes of the episode "Bloodshed in Space," in which Mittermeyer and Reuenthal are tasked with bringing down Admiral Ovlasser. And the DNT events are pretty wild. I mean, they're basically like they're power armor size, but they look like actual mechs. Like, there's not, like, I gotta be honest, I kind of really dig the Empire power armor. Like, they don't even have helmets. Like, it's just like
it's armor plate.
Yeah, it's almost like a giant chest plate that encompasses their entire, like, torso.
It's a mech without the head,
Yeah, it's honestly a pretty cool design. I don't like that they all have swords now. I wish they still had axes. I feel like a long-standing appeal of Legend of the Galactic Heroes is, like, both sides, like both the FPA and the Empire, arrived at the, like, conclusion that the axe is the most ideal weapon for cutting through power armor. Yeah. So many of them using, like, I wouldn't mind if, like, Reuenthal and Mittermeyer had swords, because, like, of course those guys would. They're ridiculous. Yeah. But, like, I kind of was annoyed that the rest of the rank and file power armor, like the armored grenadiers, also had swords. I was like, oh, that kind of, it just doesn't feel the same. Like, when Ovlasser is the only dude with an axe, it's like,
we saw in the, like, trailer a while back that obviously Reuenthal and Mittermeyer would fight Ovlasser, and one of them was dual wielding and one of them was not, and it was a matter of some debate among the GLORIO crew of who was dual wielding and who was not.
I will always insist. I always thought it was Mittermeyer.
I waffled, but I think I settled on Mittermeyer.
Like, I think that, like, between those two, like, if those two are members in a JRPG party, Mittermeyer is definitely closer to the, like,
he has the higher dex, so he'd use 2-weapon fighting.
Yeah, like, he definitely tends towards, like, that end of the spectrum, whereas, like, Reuenthal is definitely the dude who, like, wields, like, a broadsword or a katana. Like, as his like unique party member weapon. You know,
yeah.
but yeah,
Sorry about
yeah.
that tangent.
No, it's fine. The events of that episode are interesting as hell. To be honest, it's a. I do have some like quibbles about like how they portrayed things. I think that like their take on the Team Rocket special of how they trap Ovalister is a little contrived because they don't really like explain how they set all of that up.
Right.
Like the liquid that's in the pit is like where'd that liquid come from? How did they know how to freeze it?
Just kind
Like
of take it on faith that they
like
set it up.
as yeah, like you have to take it on face value that oh like they did some sci-fi shit. But like it's like okay, look, digging a hole for Ovalister to fall in is like ridiculous and silly, but it's also a lot more like understandable how they got there, right?
Yeah.
Like you know in your head, like okay, like some dudes got some shovels, started digging a hole, but like when instead you are like luring Ovalister to this freaking like Resident Evil final boss like chamber with like a catwalk and a pit of like energy oil
Yeah.
underneath, like it's like how did you know about this? Like how did you set this up? Like this isn't even like your fortress, right? Like how did you like set all of this up in a way that like Ovalister didn't notice? And it's I mean the explanation is that Ovalister is an idiot, but
Yes.
it's it was still a little weird. I mean, look, we can get into this more in the
Actual.
in our sister podcast, the GLORIO Chat, where we'll probably get into more depth about
DNT.
the events and occurrings of
Yeah.
DNT.
But for
I
final note,
think with that,
do you want to talk
yeah,
about like how Legend of Galactic Heroes just delayed satisfaction?
yeah. So now that like both Trunick and Lang are essentially off the table, while it's very satisfying, there's definitely a part of think every fan who watches a show like this and is like, how come this didn't happen sooner? Like, how did these two fucking dirtbags manage to hang around for this long? And I think I have to commend the bravery of Yoshiki Tanaka and the writing of Legend of the Galactic Heroes that this is a show that willingly killed off some of its most popular and well-liked characters pretty early in its run. There's Kirky Eyes, of course, at the end of season 1. And then even Yangwen Li, like in the grand scheme of things, dies fairly early in a show that is or was ostensibly about democracy versus autocracy. There was also other examples like Jessica Edwards and Bucock. There's a lot of characters that are way more likable and way more interesting than Job Trunicht or Heydrich Lang that were taken out of the story. And like you think about like how fandom works, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
why do fans stick around with a show, with a work? And often it's the likable characters. We often talk about what is the appeal of Legend of the Galactic Heroes. It's that it takes very complex, very high-minded ideas about politics and society and then ties them to very likable, interesting characters. And so that it is not the story of democracy versus autocracy. It is a battle between the ideals of Yang Wen Li and Reinhard von Lohengrin. And so to be willing to remove so many of those characters from the board and to have faith that your viewers would stay interested, I think is really impressive because, like, you think about it, we live in a world where Job Trunicht outlived Yang Wen Li by a sizable margin.
Yeah.
And logic should tell you that, like, not that that's not a good story, but that's a story that annoys fans because we are forced to live with this much more unlikable, unpleasant character that, again, like makes for more interesting storytelling, but in the moment makes you feel worse while you're watching. And like I'm gonna save these thoughts probably for like our big wrap up because I want to finish this before I really lead out with these. But like, I'll wholly admit that season 4, I'm still enjoying it, but I can tell I'm not enjoying it as much now that Yang Wen Li is no longer around. The the story has just lost a certain like it's just lost a certain angle and depth to it that, again, I think the story's still very interesting. I think it's still very well told, and I think that the events that are happening within the Empire are compelling, but there's a part of me that is just not as emotionally invested in like Reuenthal rebelling against the Empire compared to how I felt about Yang Wen-li defending the last shredded fragments of a liberal democracy.
Right.
And like, but I'm still watching it. And again, I think that's like a testament to this show that like that there are so many interesting characters and there are so many interesting plot lines that even when this show is like more than willing to get rid of some of its best ones, that there are still enough left over to carry an interesting and engaging narrative.
Yeah.
And that, like, I guess it's like, it is thematically appropriate that Job Trunicht and Heydrich Lang survived and thrived as long as they did. You know, I think a weaker series, right? I think a weaker series would have made Job Trunicht an easy season 1 punching bag, right? Like Job Trunicht is like the villain of season 1, and then they get rid of him, and it's good thing we got rid of that guy. It's a good thing it's that easy to get rid of bad, corrupt politicians who hide behind the rhetoric and loopholes of the political system they exploit. But we live in 2019, and we know
it's not that easy.
That bad politicians are actually exceedingly difficult to get rid of, especially in democracies.
Yeah.
And isn't that the appeal? Isn't that the dangerous appeal, the dangerous allure of an autocracy is, hey, that guy over there who really sucks, like, we can just get rid of him. Except that we even see that begin to fall apart because Job Trunicht and Lang both thrive under the Empire. And so I think it's like, again, like emotionally, it's not fun to see those characters running around, but I think thematically it is very appropriate to the themes of Legend of the Galactic Heroes that is like, hey, these guys exploit the system. They do it audaciously so. And they will continue to do so. And like, honestly, sometimes it takes more extreme action to get rid of those who hide behind loopholes and rhetoric. And, you know, not that I'm saying we should all, storm Congress and hang all the politicians like the NSMC said all those episodes ago, but food for thought, you know?
Yeah, sure. All right, I think with that, I think we're good.
I think we're going to call it a podcast after that. Definitely not audacious call to action or anything, but
I'm sure you vote next year.
Yes. Okay, so as always, you can listen to this podcast and read all of our work at theglorioblog.com. You can follow us on Twitter at theglorioblog. You can watch Legend of the Galactic Heroes on High Dive and VRV. You can also listen to the podcast on Google Play, Spotify, Podbean, all those places. If those aren't your flavor, then you can also catch us on YouTube. And if you got some free time or want to listen to us talk a little bit more about D&T specifically and its comparisons to the OVA, then maybe tune in for the GLORIO Chat, our sister podcast, where we talk about more recently airing anime, including Legend of the Galactic Heroes D&T. Also, perhaps check out GLORIO's King of the Kaiju, where our GLORIO UK correspondents discuss a new kaiju movie every couple of weeks, and got to give them credit. They're definitely going for some weirder, more obscure stuff. I was kind of expecting it to just be like a lot of Godzilla and all that stuff, but they're going for some weird deep cuts there, which is definitely cool. And I think that's going to do it. So, as always, thank you all so much for listening. Iro, thank you for accompanying me on this journey.
Thank you.
And until next time, I will see you all amongst the sea of stars.